Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about something that's really important, and that is the mental health impact on veterans after they leave the forces. It's a topic that doesn't get enough attention, I'm sure, and as I'm a veteran, I'm trying to change that in my own personal way. This is my story about my journey to realise that I had a mental health issue. To pass training and become a soldier in the British Army was, in my life, my proudest moment. Apart from seeing my kids born and seeing my bride walk up the aisle and getting my degrees and buy my first car and all the rest of it. But as they say,
what have the Romans ever done for us?
When somebody serves in the military, they're part of a highly structured environment, one that breeds camaraderie, teamwork, a sense of purpose, a clear mission. But when that chapter of your life closes, many veterans find themselves facing a new and very bleak and daunting reality. Leaving the services can feel like stepping off a fast-moving train very suddenly. Everything is completely different. The train shoots off and it goes off into the distance and leaves you behind. You're all on your own. You lose that routine that you had, that system support, and sometimes even the sense of identity that you built up over the years. For many, this can lead to feelings of isolation, loss of identity, anxiety and depression. Well, in my case, I spent 25 awesome years in the Army. I did 7 vastly different jobs and roles. I started off training as an electronics technician. I ended up working on Challenger main battle tank, which I served with in the First Gulf War with the tank regiment with a history that goes back to Waterloo, the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. Early on in my career, I passed the elite Royal Marine All Arms Commando training course. I attempted to become a helicopter pilot for about 18 months and illness put paid to that. But my hobby was parachuting, and I eventually became a parachute instructor and eventually a professional skydive cameraman. But throughout my whole Army career, one thing was common. I drank a lot. Oh boy, did we all drink a lot. I mean, I think in the 1980s, the British Army had the fittest fighting alcoholics on the planet, without a shadow of a doubt. But we paid for it though. In the early 1980s, it started off with the Falklands campaign. In the 1990s, it brought the first Gulf War. 4 years later, Bosnia, 2 tours for me. 3 years later, I went to Kosovo. 3 years after that, and the worst of all was Afghanistan, from where so many of my colleagues never returned alive. Eventually though, I had to leave. I'd done my 22 years and a few more to boot. I ended up doing 25. But I had to join Civvy Street, and to be honest, Civvy Street was the hardest of all. When I left the Army to start a new life, I did not have a flipping clue how hard it was going to be. The issue for me as a veteran after 25 years is I'd become a squaddie, an institutionalised squaddie. We walked, talked and acted soldier. We soldiers think completely different to the average Joe. Josephine, Josetta, whatever, you can understand our problems. I say we because you can take the man out of the army, but you can't take the army out of the man or the woman or the whatever, you know what I mean. I actually left the forces at the back end of 2004, 2 days after my 42nd birthday. I already had some money coming in from some professional work I was doing with a film company called Eon Productions, the people that make the Bond films. The world looked really, really rosy for myself and my wife. We bought a house up in Cambridgeshire in the beautiful flatlands up there. But all that didn't last long. My error in moving up there was it was just too far from London and there was no work for me in the Fenlands. So that work dried up and I had to get work doing other things. I did driving and all sorts of things. But one of those jobs was as a manager for a very large shed company up in Wisbech. Now the average wage up there is 2 carrots and a turnip for doing overtime. And this is where my being a squaddie didn't help. My thought process, as always, is okay. Now I'm the new boss. Okay, guys, let's get together and let's get it all done, and then we can have a beer afterwards. Well, that didn't work. All they wanted was more carrots and more turnips. So I turned back to the film and TV, and eventually, after a couple of years, as I was a professionally trained cameraman, I found some work, and it was great, no problem at all. But my attitude, my demeanour when I got into production was, let's get it done. You know, stop bitching, let's just get this job done and get it on the road. And we'll whinge about it later in the pub. And just that attitude is typical for most squaddies. But instead of carrots and turnips now, they wanted something else. They wanted money, more money. And sod the job, if it wasn't worth their while financially, they just weren't going to get out of bed. Now, the mindset of a squaddie is completely different to a civvy, and I was finding it very, very hard trying to convince anybody to listen. Studies show that a significant number of veterans experience PTSD, which is an anxiety disorder involving depression and anxiety and all sorts of other things. It's not just for military, but it's for anything. You could have had a car crash or seen somebody die in hospital or whatever. Everybody can suffer from PTSD. But the statistics for military PTSD are quite alarming. About 11 to 20% of veterans in any given year who served in Iraq and Bosnia and Kosovo and Afghanistan are diagnosed with PTSD every year. And that's not just a number, those are real lives affected by trauma. Now, I personally know from experience, and I know of over 35 people who I served with that have committed suicide since leaving the forces back in 2004. And that's just the ones I personally know of. And what makes it even more challenging is that the stigma surrounding mental health is that many veterans feel that they have to keep it to those struggles to themselves, fearing external judgment or the perception of weakness is not good. You know, I'm an ex-soldier, alpha. But let's be clear, seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's a brave step forward toward healing. So what can we do? Well, firstly, we can create safe spaces for veterans. Safe spaces for all men, to be honest, and all people. Somewhere to share their stories without fear of stigma. Encourage open conversation about mental health, get them to discuss their own personal problems, and let them know that they are not alone in their problems and issues. Organisations that offer support and resources are out there all over the place, and they help people connect. And one of them I would talk about in a minute. But if you're a veteran watching, remember that this is okay to reach out for help. You know, whether it's talking to a professional therapist, joining a support group, or just connecting with friends, take that step. You deserve support and understanding. You're all heroes. You're all veterans, for crying out loud. Okay, so back to my story. Let's skip to the part where I threw my desk across the studio in the early 2000s and spent 8 years moving out to Spain and building an off-grid house and living the good life. Let's skip a bit further forwards where Brexit forced me back to the UK and I split with my girlfriend. And I ended up working for a funeral company in Reading. And this is where my life started to change. In this job, I was now dealing with the deceased and their families. And there's a lot of trauma counselling involved in dealing with this kind of procedure. In a lot of cases, I was the last person to see the family member that was so vulnerable, lying there, quiet, so past caring, but, you know, strangely happy. And I found an extremely cathartic job. I loved that job and it changed me forever. It wasn't to be, however, forever, because there wasn't any money in it, and to exist in the UK is inordinately expensive. And so I had to go and find money elsewhere. But that experience working with that funeral company and dealing with the trauma and dealing with all the counselling that I went through just stayed with me forever. So, okay, let's skip forward another 5 years. My then girlfriend is an ex. COVID has hit us hard, and it was during that monumental world-changing event that so many people suffered from mental health issues. And it was during this period that online, good old internet, and I met somebody, Debbie, and we got married in 2023. Debbie is an absolute fantastic hypnotherapist, a really, really good one. And I've seen her talk to people, and just the way that she's trained to do that simple skill has changed people's lives forever, simply by talking. And by the beginning of 2024, however, Debbie noticed that in me, psychologically, there were some changes that were not advised, not nice. And she recommended that I maybe attend a man's club somewhere. And so I'd seen one advertised, a local one, and I went to this man's club, and yeah, it was just men only. So I stepped through those hallowed doors only to discover salvation. So the club I joined and eventually ended up being a moderator with is now called Silent Storms. So what has this got to do with veterans with issues? Well, to be honest, at the time I didn't know I had any. I thought it was everybody else and not me. But after listening to these blokes talking in these groups on a Monday night, from just about anything to do with men's stuff, no politics, no religion, no wokeism, no ongoing legal matters, but basically guys talking about stuff they would not normally talk about. And I was listening to these guys, and I eventually trained up and become one of their moderators one of the guys that runs the group sessions to ensure that everybody gets to talk and be heard. It's not only changed my life, but it's also putting me in a position where I've studied mental health illness and its causes. It's going to help me understand my personal issues as a result. There was a point in early 2024 when I was listening to a guy talking about the sudden loss of his father. And while he was talking, there was something in me just triggered. And when it was my turn to do so, I just blurted out what I felt that I had for so long that had caused me so much pain. And it was that I had a massive regret that I didn't actually take part in direct action. Not a lot. Where all the guys I worked with did, and a lot of them didn't come home. And don't get me wrong, I was there on the front line with them in Afghanistan and Bosnia and Kosovo and all those places. But I was a sergeant major, and my job role at the time was looking after the troops and planning their job roles and planning their patrols. So I didn't go out on patrol much. But when they did, they went out and experienced something and came back. And these post-operational conversations that they had left me excluded from their own personal experiences. So I became isolated in my position. Don't get me wrong, I picked up the pieces, I picked up their pieces, actual pieces, when they returned sometimes and didn't, quite literally. And all the time I still felt part of the army, but in the end, after a while, I had to say goodbye to that life of camaraderie and support, and with loads and loads of stories. Oh, so many stories. But I was all alone in this wide world of Civvy Street, and the army didn't give a hoot. It couldn't. It had another job to do and more wars to fight and more families to say, "It is with great sadness that we regret." But I missed it. I missed it all. No civvy was ever going to understand. But now I have a place where I can get to tell my experiences. I can get to tell my issues, not just to do with the army, but anything. And everybody listens. On more than one occasion, we've had people wanting to know more about, what I've been going through, because they know somebody in the same boat and that person doesn't know where to turn. And I know differently now. I spent the last year almost totally studying mental health illness, mental health awareness, mental health first aid, and I'm starting to become a qualified national counsellor. I'm only level 2 at the moment, but I'm still learning. And my wife has made me my wife as well, but my life has made me one of those blokes that you don't want at parties sometimes, because the hosts are going to be afraid that all I'm going to do is talk about mental health and, Silent Storm's club and all the rest of it. But the truth is, I don't really care. I know that I and these clubs have saved lives. These talking groups have saved lives. I know that we've changed lives that didn't know where to go to get saved, lives that matter. And now more than ever, these people now know that they are part of something better too. So in summary, it's important for men to talk. We don't. We should. We must. Any veteran, don't be afraid. Come forward, talk. It's the most crucial thing you can do in your life to help you recover. So let's work together and raise awareness and make a difference. And please share your experiences in the comments below, and let's support each other in the journey. Please subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell to allow me to make more videos and for more discussion like this. And you've got to remember that the best thing you can possibly do if you've got an issue is talk.